I hope everybody is staying safe and is being well. Want to give you a couple of housekeeping details. But before I do that, I would ask that we just stop for a moment and keep a colleague just really received some very, very sad news about our colleague, Ron Rice. Senator Ron Rice in New Jersey lost his wife today. And so I am going to ask if you would just allow a moment of silence for Senator Ron Rice of New Jersey and his lovely wife who transitioned today. If we could just pause for a moment and have him and his family in our thoughts and prayers, please. Thank you so much. And for those of you who know Senator Rice, if you want to reach out to him on a personal level, I'm sure he would be most grateful to hear from you. So as I was saying, welcome to the third in a series of webinars that NBCSL is sponsored as a result of the work group we created to address COVID-19. This webinar, it will focus, as we build it, it's allowing members a chance to direct some questions. We are really in a listening mode today because what we plan to do is 2 additional webinars on education. We will have the next webinar will focus on K through 12 education. And then the 5th webinar, I had to think for a minute to count mentally in my head. The 5th webinar will focus on higher ed. And we wanted to break the 2 of them up. So we thought that it was worthy of that. Just a couple of housekeeping details, and I think our hosts have put that on the screen. If you'd like to raise your hand or enter information in the chat room, please just use the feature that is on your screen. And we are going to start, and I will ask Wanzina, our director and our IT specialist, if there is anyone yet who has raised their hand. Our plan is for the questions that you are raising or will raise today. In the next 2 webinars that we have planned, we are providing opportunities for members of our corporate roundtable as well as our labor roundtable to work with us on getting responses to those questions, and then to address those and have the responses in the next webinar that we do. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are like me and like others in a state where your governor or your school, whoever the decision maker is, has decided to reopen the schools. There is a lot of push from the executive branch for states and districts to reopen the schools. The question that we kind of wanted to have a conversation around today is twofold. One, for those of you who are in districts where the schools are open, have submitted a plan, and they are either going to open for 5 days face-to-face, or a hybrid kind of approach where there is some online learning as well as some face-to-face learning. The foremost question in my mind, and I'm sure in yours as well, is what do we do? It's okay if we're saying we're going to open the schools, but how do we keep them open? And for most of us, this is about not just opening them, but making sure that our students are safe, that the kids are safe, that the teachers are safe. And it even goes beyond the teachers and administrators. When we talk about schools and talk about opening schools, what we recognize is that there is an entire support system around opening schools. So we've got to be concerned, for example, about the cleaning staff, the janitorial staff, because we know from the CDC guidelines that cleaning is an important part of this. We also recognize that we are talking about people who work in the cafeteria, who serve breakfast and lunches. We're talking about school bus drivers, a number of things. And let me just say to you guys, I don't want to sit here and talk for an entire hour, so I don't know what y'all might be waiting for to raise your hand or just share. Is there any one of those of you who are on the line or is on the line who wants to at least say something? Tell me what's going on in your area, mainly so that I can stop talking and listen to y'all, because this is not about listening to me. It's about us listening to each other. Any comments, any questions, any thoughts on what I've said or on the approach that we are using? And all of y'all most of y'all are elected officials. I know some of you may be staff sitting in for a member, but I don't think many of you are shy. I'm just trying to drum up a conversation so that we can listen to each other. Any takers? Going once? Going twice? Y'all, come on. Somebody's got something they want to say, I'm sure. Anybody in the chat? Anybody raise their hand yet? Conversation?
Hi, this is Assemblywoman Jackson in New Jersey.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Assemblywoman. And please, did you hear my comments about Senator Rice's wife passing?
I missed it, but I am aware, and our hearts and prayers go out to and his family. We've been talking about this. Education, returning back to school. Some of the concerns, which are valid, that you bring up today. The other piece I think we often forget out is our students that speak a second language and our disabled students. And I think there has been conversation about bringing back that small population, even though we still have the social distancing. We still have our special ed students that may not be able to keep the mask on. I'm not big on testing, because you can test negative today and turn around 2 days down and test positive. So I'm just not sure, but in terms of making sure that they get the services that they receive. If they're one-on-one, they've been receiving services, they've been doing some teaching, but our students, our English learner students, it was bad before because we don't have enough staff, we don't have enough teachers to teach, but this is just compounded worse. And so I haven't heard much around that space in terms of talking about providing resources to these children as well. As I said before, the teaching, there just don't have enough. That we're talking about trying to bring them all together here in New Jersey, in my county, in Mercer County, because it was the teachers, we just didn't have enough supply of them. And so I didn't know if there was anyone out there that have heard of any kind of programs that maybe we can incentivize teachers. And also and Black and brown teachers, we just don't have enough. And even in this space now, everybody's talking about going virtual. We haven't talked about it, but I'm sure it'll hit in September. I lost my tablet was lost, it was stolen, I don't have it. What does that replacement process look like? I mean, then you still have those that just don't have the internet. And for some folks, it's hard for them to even realize that everybody is not on the internet or don't have access. The other point I wanted to bring up is multiple households. Children, you might have a brother that's 7 that might be in the 2nd grade. You got another one in middle school and another one in high school. Are there any best practices out there to say, how does, a single parent or a family period try to manage that during the day? School is usually 8 to 2. You got 3 kids, 3 different levels. How is that supposed to work? And everybody don't have a big dining room table. Everybody don't have this kind of space. So I was wondering if anyone heard about other maybe community resources that might be out there, community schools or partners that are willing to open their doors for that type of space for families. But these are just some of the challenges that we're facing here. And if anybody wants to offer some suggestions, we would greatly appreciate it.
Assemblywoman, thank you so much for those comments. And as I wait to see if anyone else wants to respond, let me, if I may, just respond to a couple of things you made. We'll remind those of you who may have joined us when after I started, this is an opportunity for us to hear questions and also for us to get answers. So Assemblywoman, you've raised some very important ones that we want to take a look at. You talked about special needs, and what we really want to keep in mind that will run the gamut from special education to autistic children. So when we use the category special needs, those young people who are on what they call IEPs, we need to find out what we can do in that regard. The other point you made, which I had not thought about, and in some jurisdictions, in some places where we represent, we are going to have to really pay attention to ELA, English as a second language, and what's going to happen there. And then your third point about this notion of losing the Chromebooks. What is the district's policy going to be? And I'm repeating all of this because our staff is taking very copious notes, because we want to make sure that when we do the next 2 webinars, that we are responding to questions that you've raised. And of course, the real biggie on here, and the notion of multiple households, that is important as well. You've got 3 or 4 kids in varying grades. You're not a teacher. How do you really effectively make sure that if they are working online, that the instruction is geared toward their level? And the real boogaboo in all of this that you mentioned, Assemblywoman, is broadband and access to broadband. As a part of the CARES Act, there is a lot of money that has been set aside for broadband, and in most states, I know here in South Carolina, we are working with our regulatory agencies to try to make sure that something happens with that. But you've raised some really important points, some really important issues. One that I think we need to keep in mind all these things have a price tag, but y'all, this notion of physical distancing, for those states where you already got overcrowded classrooms, how are we really going to do that? And just making sure that when we have the conversation about reopening our schools, that we're also having a commitment from the chief executive of that state or somebody about putting their money where their mouth is, and that is having the resources to allow our kids to be in these schools safely. So is there someone else who would like to respond to what the Assemblywoman has said or raise some other issues or concerns? And if you are, our staff will unmute your mic. If you've got something, you can use the feature, the chat, the raise hand feature or chat. And I would remind you, if there's something that comes to your mind after somebody has spoken or whatever, just this is being recorded. So it would be great to have you put that information in the chat section so that we all can see it. Are there others who'd like to comment? Assemblywoman Jackson has gotten us off to a great start. Others? Y'all don't want me to start scrolling and seeing who all is on here and then just volunteering y'all to say something, huh? No?
Hello.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Violet, and I'm an intern for Senator Leroy Comrie. He is a senator in New York, and I'm currently a rising senior in high school. So I'm very
good
by everything that is happening right now, and especially like the New York City public school, the DOE, they are facing like.
Violet, did I lose you?
Hello?
Violet, you were muted there for a minute, Violet. Do you mind starting over? And welcome. We need the high school seniors' perspective on this issue.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So
well,
my concern is because I attend the New York City Public High School, and the DOE is facing major budget cuts. So my concern is, how will they afford the extra staffing? How will they afford to like accommodate to the CDC rules and everything that comes with that?
Excellent question, Violet. And a lot of us have that same question. And a part of what we want to do today is raise these issues so that legislators, when they're back home talking to their constituents about, do we open the schools? Do we not open them? All those are questions that we certainly hope we can get answers for, because at the end of the day, it is about resources. And you are absolutely right. With budget cuts across the board in a lot of our states, how in the world, with budgets being slashed, are we going to find the resources to, just take one thing, for example, find the resources to maintain physical distancing? And I like to say physical distancing because we want people to be socially engaged. We won't start talking about the mental health issues associated with COVID. But you raised an excellent point. Don't have an answer for it. Just want you to know that that is something that is on all of our minds. And we certainly will be making sure that legislators, NBCSL members, are raising those questions about cost, about resources, because it's only fair to say to a governor or a superintendent of education or a school, you want our children to go back to school, but show me the money. How are they going to be able to go back and be safe in that classroom setting? So thank you for that. Now, what are your plans beyond high school, Violet? You're a rising senior, so you will graduate this year?
Yeah, I'm a
in
rising senior.
2021?
Yeah, the class of 2021.
And you have plans after graduation?
Yes, I plan to attend college.
Okay. Any thoughts on where? You still looking?
I kind of have my eyes set on a few schools.
Okay. Well, make sure you visit some campuses, and let me take this opportunity. What do you know yet what you want to major in, or you're still thinking about it?
I'm leaning towards majoring in like sociology and public policy.
Okay. Well, that is something that is near and dear to my heart as a social work administrator, and policy is always important. So good luck with that. And the fact that you are interning as a high school senior in this office, it really speaks volumes about your commitment. So we wish you well. Now, would anyone like to ask a question or speak to what we just heard? So this will be a long hour if this is if this is how we're. Oh wait. Other comments?
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, I was trying to get on, Madam Chair. This is your colleague Terry Alexander
Oh,
from South
right.
Carolina.
Hey, Rep. Alexander, how are you?
Fine. Thank you for making this available. You know, I serve on the COVID-19 Education Committee here in South Carolina. And one thing that's so disturbing here right now that we heard from our superintendent, she said that right now with all of the schools going back, every school will not have a nurse. Now, that is frightening. You know, that is frightening to say the least. And then with all the parameters, she is suggesting that our schools are going to need air quality fresheners, you know, all of these sanitizing equipment and personnel. As the young lady mentioned too, you know, as our budgets are looming to be cut as well. So I want them to go back, but I'm scared for our students, for our teachers, our staff members, our bus drivers, our cafeteria help, those guys and ladies who clean our halls and keep our everything clean. I'm just afraid for that because we do not have, and most schools probably do not have everything that they need to keep everybody as safe as possible. And I'm afraid for us. I'm afraid for our children. And again, I'm afraid for our teachers as well.
Mm-hmm. Rep. Alexander, what do you propose? And if you would, just if you don't mind responding to the concerns you heard from Violet, our high school senior, any comments you want to make on that?
That is quite interesting. You know, they're cutting the schools, they're cutting the budgets for traditional public education, as you say. And it's going to make it extremely hard for particularly in South Carolina. I'm not sure how it operates up there, particularly in South Carolina, Madam Chair, where we have very, very poor school districts who do not have the resources before, you know, just to maintain the normalcy of a school. Now you're asking them to rear up. And I'm just hoping that our state provide more resources to these schools that they know are low when it comes to dollars and cents. Relative to that young lady, and I didn't hear it all because I was trying to tie in, but I'm not sure. I didn't hear exactly what she was saying. I don't think I heard. The last thing I heard her say that they were cutting her some of the resources in public education up there. I didn't hear everything else. So she might want to respond again.
Well, and basically you kind of addressed her main issue was how in the world are we to maintain the proper distancing in this era of budget cuts? With budget cuts, where are the resources going to come from?
Exactly right. And more, and would put this in your pipe and smoke it, if you will. If 2 teachers are tested positive, then everyone that has been in the presence of those 2 teachers must quarantine for 10 to 15 days. So just imagine if 3 teachers test positive, then everybody in that building who was near that particular teacher, he or she must quarantine for 10 to 15 days. So you're talking about sometimes 5, 6, 7, 8 teachers may have to quarantine for 10 days.
Right.
So, you know, it's not a good place to be right now. I know the schools in North Carolina and the teachers came out in force. Teachers in North Carolina said they were not going back. They just told them point blank, we're not going back in September. So all the schools, I believe, in North Carolina, particularly on this side of the border where I am, they're doing virtual the first 9 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's not a good place to be. It's not a good place for this country or this state, our individual states to be.
Right. So let me ask you something. Do you mind sharing with us? You mentioned you're on the COVID-19 Education Committee, subcommittee. Have y'all arrived at has the issue of resources come up and how we're going to pay for all of the safety and stuff?
Well, you know I had a conversation with the speaker a couple of weeks ago. What the speaker is banking on is the CARE money that the superintendent got from the federal government. Now, and I'm not sure exactly what, but I think we are going to be making some recommendations. We have one more meeting before we go back into session. And we're asking Molly to bring all of her concerns, you know, both financial and the likes. And we're probably going to have some recommendations, but I don't see the speaker even entertaining no financial responsibilities moving forward. He's hoping, and they're hoping that we have enough money to do what we need to do. And I just don't see that right now. Because you're talking about extra money in addition to the normalcy. You're talking about extra money. And I mentioned the fact it takes more than just taking a broom and going down the halls now and cleaning the hall floors. You're talking about sanitizing the whole building. You're talking about sanitizing these classes and these bathrooms. So it's going to take some extra resources. There was some argument, there was some discussion with one of my colleagues who said that, well, since it doesn't cost as much, you know, since they're not using as much money now to educate a kid, maybe they can look at some of those resources. But I'm thinking it costs more because you have to do additional things. You know, you have to do the virtual, you have to do the cleansing, the cleaning of the school buses, you know, that whole 9 yards. So I just don't see how that's going to jive. And she said some are considering cutting taxes for school because of this.
Cutting taxes.
Right, because they're saying that for kids to go, it doesn't cost as much for a kid to go virtual as a kid to be in front of a classroom.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to anybody else. I think they are mistaken in that regard. And again, for those who may have joined us, this is after we started, this is the third in a series of COVID-19 webinars that the COVID-19 work group is sponsoring. What we wanted to do with education, because it's so broad, we wanted to have this as a listening session so that we could listen to the comments, concerns, questions from our members. And what we have on the drawing board are 2 more COVID-19 education webinars. We will have one that is focused on K through 12, and our second one will be on higher ed. What we will do with the questions and comments from today's conversation is use this and share it with members of our labor workforce roundtable and our corporate roundtable, because they will be a part of the next 2 that we do, which will bring hopefully some clarity and responses and answers to some of the questions and comments that y'all have raised. I think when we talk about all this money coming from the CARES Act, as legislators, one of the things we've got to be very careful about is making sure that we don't allow this notion of all of this money floating around to be used as an excuse to not to adequately fund education. And so what is my point? Let's look at this whole notion of PPP and all the monies that were given out that we are now finding didn't necessarily go where they needed to be. And on the point of all this CARES money, and again, I don't want this to be a South Carolina conversation, but Representative Alexander, I'm sure, can share with y'all, here in South Carolina, we have a governor. Each state has a certain pot of money that the governor of that state has discretion over. In South Carolina, we had a total of 42 million that our governor could spend. And there was quite a bit of disappointment, shall I say, for want of a better word, that our governor chose to take 32 million of that 36 million of that money, of that 42 million, and give it to the private schools to use as vouchers for children of color. And I know that we've got supporters and non-supporters of vouchers in private schools, but let me be real clear. The issue for me and the issue for the organization is, you know, when we have all these schools, particularly in rural districts with limited resources, is it really the best use of money to give 67% of a pot of money to help 5,000 students? Or is it more responsible to give to give some of that money to help, several 100,000 students who make up our public school system? So all of these are just things that we need to keep in mind. And really, really, it's going to be difficult. The one thing I hope all of us recognize is this is not going away. It's not like we will be at the end of the year and it will be business as usual. I think all of us would be better served if we recognize that we are going to have to adapt to a new normal. Going back to the way things were is just probably not going to be very productive. Other comments, questions? Other comments, questions? Now y'all ought to be about tired of hearing me. I'm tired of hearing myself. Anybody on the line who have not spoken, who would like to share some thoughts? And I really want those of you who represent urban areas, when we talk about this notion of broadband and access to broadband, that's a real issue. And we can't assume that just because one lives in an urban area, that we are, that's not an issue. And so what I'd like to do at this point, we've got two of our, a member of our corporate roundtable and a member of our labor workforce roundtable. So I'm going to ask Regina and then Nicole if they would speak and share some wisdom to the group. Anybody from North Carolina, DC, or New York? And I know we've got Assemblywoman Jackson from New Jersey, and we've got Violet who's on the line for a legislator from New York. So I will. Okay, who wants to start?
Okay, Chairwoman, it is wonderful to be joined with you today on this important issue. Know that those of us at the American Federation of Teachers are working very hard to ensure that every school is prepared, or at least our teachers are ready. We are very concerned that schools are strapped with budget issues and cannot make the adequate transition immediately. In addition to that, we're even concerned in remote learning of those communities that do not have Wi-Fi service, and in addition to Wi-Fi service, do not have enough computers or laptops or instruments, particularly if there are more than 2 or 3 persons, children within a household. We are working very hard. I will post in the chat a document that we have prepared on school safety, what we are asking each of our school districts to have put in place, as well as a back to school document that we have been working on for some time now. We are concerned not only about our teachers, we are concerned about our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, and the janitors. Many of them are our members also. And so we are working very closely and will love to work very closely with you and your members on any particular city or state that they're working in. I know I have a similar woman from New Jersey where I serve on the governor's re-entry plan, and I know she will have some great things to talk about what is happening in New Jersey. I want to caution us also as we prepare to go back to school. In addition to COVID, we need to understand that fall season is also flu season for our children. And so there will be an additional added situation that we must deal with. Children are known to transmit the cold and the flu. And so on top of that, we have a lot to be concerned about and available for anything. But I'll make every effort to put in the chat our documents. I got a new computer, so I don't have everything in place. And I'm prepared. I'm standing by for any questions also. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned the Assemblywoman Jack. She opened it up for us and shared a wealth of information, got the conversation rolling. So I'll have to let Senator Rice know he's just doing a good job with his numbers.
Yes.
Sounds good. And Ms. Nyoka, I keep mispronouncing your name. Would you?
Yep, it's Nyoka.
Nyoka. Nyoka, thank you. Would you care to share anything? Tell us who you're with and then share what from your perspective.
Sure. I am with K-12, so I've been in the virtual space since 2007. I started with K-12 as a teacher and kind of moved through the ranks, and I probably met some of you guys at the conference last year, so it's nice to see some of your names here. I think what I would like to add is that some of the ways that we're supporting districts and schools is we're helping provide professional development for teachers. I think that's one of the main concerns for schools now is making this transition from brick and mortar to a completely online program. And in some cases it is very different. And of course it can cause a lot of anxiety for teachers as well. And so we've been providing some professional development to those teams, trying to help support hosting sessions where we can ideate around how you might support your teachers, whether they're in a blended model or if they're in a fully virtual model, whatever your model is that's going to happen for this fall or for this school year. We've been really trying to support that transition. And so in some districts, we're helping with trying to, as some of you said, talking about providers and bandwidth, trying to build those partnerships with them to try to make sure that either you can get some routers on some buses in the neighborhood or something like that, and trying to make sure that some of those options are available for some of those districts and schools. And so I definitely can hear your pain, and I feel your anxiety as well. I think we have been completely overwhelmed with the number of schools and districts that are reaching out. I think in the next 2 weeks, we'll be training over 24,000 teachers. So that is what we're kind of living and breathing right now. And so I'd be happy to offer any other support or suggestions to you all as you're planning through this stage.
Thank you, Nick. And what I'd like to ask, if you would put your contact information in the chat so that as our members join the call, they are able to reach out. And Regina, if you would do the same, that would be great. How would either of you care to respond to an issue the Assemblywoman raised about resources and what might be out there that one can avail themselves of?
This is Nyoka. So I did hear about the use of the CARE Act, which is most of the districts are using when they're partnering with us. They're also using some of those funds to pay for that professional development for their teams as well. And so we've been in partnership and in conversation with different districts and schools about how they might be able to use those funds, but then also offering some of our services. We offer webinars and we have videos that we offer to those schools and districts for free. So I can definitely package those up to send to you guys as well. But I think that one of the things that I found, that is very encouraging during this time is that most of the communities and businesses are ready to step in and help because they understand that this is a pandemic and it's affecting all of our students across the board. And so you'll never know what a business might offer or what another school might offer to support hospitals, and all. They're also offering support as well as far as with Wi-Fi. So some of them are partnering with some of these larger buildings or businesses that have Wi-Fi that might be close to a neighborhood to try to share some resources that way. So I think being resourceful during this time, a lot of people are willing to make the donations and really support the schools in an effort to try to make sure that students have access to their education.
Sounds great. And just FYI, we will be creating what we've done with COVID-19 as a result of this work group is create on our website resource pages. We will have on our website a resource page dedicated just to education. So feel free to check out our website, and if there's information that you want us to post on there, we certainly would be more than happy to do that as well. Any other questions or comments for Nyoka or Regina? And I appreciate both of you being on the call.
Yes, I just want to add that it is very important that we stay connected to our congressional leadership so that they can definitely pass in the HEROES Act those dollars that need to go to these school districts in order to make some of these things happen.
Yes. And thank you, Regina, for that point. I'd be more specific and suggest to us that we focus on the U.S. Senate. Because the House has done its work. They've done their job. The legislation is sitting over there waiting for action on the Senate side. So encourage your colleagues to reach out to their two senators and encourage him or her to get that legislation moving. One of the questions I want to ask, and anybody can feel free to respond, and this is more a child care, daycare kind of thing. And Regina, I'm wondering if perhaps a lot of parents are concerned about their level of proficiency in terms of the online teaching. And so has there been a conversation about retired teachers perhaps looking at this as an opportunity to create maybe some kind of way for us to, for parents who don't quite have the confidence in their skills, for them to just, maybe create some entrepreneurial opportunities so that they could probably in a small setting be able to do something. Think about that, Regina, and I'm going to call on my colleague first, Senator Frazier, and then Brother Newton, and ask if y'all would comment in that order, please. Whatever is happening in your state or whatever may be going on as far as schools reopening, closing, what y'all have decided to do. And particularly in Minnesota, I waited too late to get to Senator Frazier because I particularly wanted to ask him about Mississippi, because what I've seen on the news is a bunch of increases in the rates of this virus. So, Mr. Newton, if you'd like to share anything.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you for being on the call.
Great seeing you, Madam President. Hope
Likewise.
you are healthy, safe, and well, you and your family. Well,
Yes, sir.
what we're having here is it's all politics as usual, and the kids are caught in the crossfire. We have a lot of spread, as you notice, and instead of a second outbreak, they call it a second uptick. But for the most part, the school boards are following suit. They're giving the parents the options to, if they want to keep their kids home, and some of the parents are choosing to do that. But for the most part, they're just delaying the start by 2 weeks. They're going to start them on like August 24th instead of the 10th, But what we're hearing also with teachers and staff going back to school for their orientation, some of them are starting to get sick and catch COVID. So it's an ever-changing thing here. I can tell you that unequivocally about 60% of the parents that were surveyed chose to keep their kids home. I know two of my grandkids here in the school system, their mother's going to let them school from home. They've been doing really great. The kids are not afraid of the technology. We're the ones that got to get used to the technology.
True.
I remember we used to have beepers back in the day. I don't want to tell my age, Madam President, but now you got these things, and you give one of these to a 5-year-old, come back in 2 minutes. You got a program, apps done, emojis. I don't know what emoji is, but they got all. Kids aren't afraid of the technology, and also God did an awesome thing. He said, "Peace be still," and He shut the whole world.
Oh yes, oh yes,
and a lot of these parents were forced for the first time to get intimately involved with their children's education. A lot of them assumed that they were doing great, and they kept bringing home smiley faces and all. But when they started to look at their day-to-day, because they were stuck at home with them, had to be involved with their education. Some of them are concerned that these kids ain't really getting the education they're supposed to be getting at the levels. Here in Pinellas, we got this thing called concordance diplomas. They're given out to a lot of Black kids. And what that is it's a diploma, but you can't get a job whether you can't get into college. Some of these kids are not proficient in reading or math. They get 12th grade diplomas when they're reading on the 7th and 8th grade level just to push them out because they're 18. But it's a lot going on. It's a lot of moving parts. I know here in the Black community, a lot of those parents are worried about getting people, like you said, to watch their kids. Also, the kids they get 2 meals a day on time in the schools. You know, it's not like when I came, whenever we get something to eat, you know, it's just the way it was. But so that's another issue too about them with resources, and also access to broadband. You know, I don't think that's a real issue, because if you remember in March when everybody got forced home, they made a way. They had buses that had broadband. They would bring buses into the neighborhoods that would be able to, the kids can log on to. And we are also providing a lot of federal funds and state funds for them to be able to provide the technologies for these kids. Another thing we're doing, if the parent chooses to keep the kid home, they're extending their SNAP benefits. They're putting additional money into it, so they provide for more food for those kids. And the ones that don't have it, I put a question out to the Secretary of Education about the parents who don't have SNAP. How would you get them, you know, food resources for their kids to be able to feed them if they choose to keep them at home and keep them safe? So that's kind of where we're at right now. The school board, as you know, have their own governance, their own taxing structure. We can just recommend. We can't make them do anything. They have voted one after the next to delay 2 weeks, but their vote is to go back, send the kids back to the brick and mortar with all these unknowns.
Right, and one of the things, we didn't even talk about sports, but I want to recognize, thank you for sharing that, Brother Newton. I want to recognize Representative Brown, Camille Brown, if you'd like to share anything about what's going on there in your area in Orlando or the state. We'd love to hear from you, and I hope things are well and that little bundle of joy is still coming in September.
That's our vice chair.
I know, we know she's high cotton, and I'm just honored that she's on the call.
I heard her having twins, girl.
Camille, are they twins?
I'm gonna name them for you, Monique and Unique.
Would y'all unmute Camille, Rep Brown, so we could hear from her, please?
Hey there.
Hey.
Can you repeat the question? I overheard you say something.
Well, first we want to make sure you're okay. Camille, are you having twins for real?
No, I'm having just one.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
I stepped away for a second. I had too much water.
Look, blame your colleague for that. But at any rate, what we're doing is just kind of, this is all just listening. And we are going around the horn, just talking about what's happening in our areas, what may be of concern as far as school opening or closing or whatever.
Okay.
Anything you'd like to share?
I know here in Florida, we are awaiting to hear about a lawsuit that our teachers have, along with our teachers union. They put out a lawsuit relating to the requirement of going face-to-face for our school year. Mm-hmm. I know Orange County is kind of trying to start based on, with dealing with the requirement. We're looking to start our online program soon, actually next week on the 10th. Mm-hmm. And then if having to go face-to-face, which we're prepared to do, that will take place on August 21st. Many of our parents are very concerned, and we've had folks within our state to speak on behalf of parents, more falsely than anything, but with stating that our parents are asking to go back to school when things that, our schools, our teachers, as well as our parents have been polled. And majority, over 60% have mentioned, they are not wanting to take the risk just yet to go back to school face to face. So you have many that are participating in the virtual program that we've started for the OPCPS versus the Florida virtual. And so, you know, we're just preparing our students for that, and also preparing our schools to open if so. One thing I know, because, you know, many of our, well, our districts are threatened, you know, if they don't open, they will not receive funding. But they have not necessarily received the adequate funding they needed to, you know, hire the additional help, to also provide, you know, the adequate safety. And so, and then also the opportunities to social distance. So we, I know our district is not requiring students to bring anything. We will be paying for, you know, cleaning products or sanitary products for our teachers and our students. So we're prepared, although we are not, we don't want our students to go in. We are prepared to take them, and just, you know, just hoping and praying, because, you know, here in Florida, but more importantly here in Orange County, we are a service industry. We're a service community. We have our theme parks, we have our hotels. And so, you know, we're kind of stuck within a rock and a hard place with, you know, parents being able to work. And they will say, you know, I can't work due to the kids at home, or I want to go back to work, but I have the children. So, but yeah, we're just hoping and praying what we've seen or heard about in Gwinnett County doesn't come to Orange County.
Yeah. And if you would, for the benefit of those on the call, Camille, just tell us what happened in Gwinnett County.
Okay, from what I read, I believe it was last week, you had 240 of our teachers that went back to school. And on day one, or after day one of returning back to the schools, there were no students in the schools, but 240 of our teachers were having to be quarantined due to already folks testing positive, or already an outbreak within just that county alone.
Wow. Can you just help me a bit more with the lawsuit? And Regina may want to respond as well, but what effect will the lawsuit by the teachers have on the school opening, or will it have any impact at all? I mean, is the fact that they have filed a lawsuit put the return to school on hold, or it is still going forward while the lawsuit is being dealt with?
And so here in Florida, we do things differently, and, you know, our leadership will keep everything moving until they don't have to. And so everything is set to go and will go. I believe whether or not this lawsuit, you know, is won by our teachers or not. And of course, our teachers this lawsuit is for our teachers not to have to go back face to face.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
wow.
it's still set to go.
Okay. And you talked about resources, and of course, Orange County, Orlando, y'all are fortunate, and you have the tax base and all of that. Is that the case across all 67 counties? Would you say that most of the counties are in a position resource-wise to take care of the physical distancing that's going to be required and all of the price tag that's associated with a safe return to school?
And I would say absolutely not. As you mentioned, we are very fortunate to have that additional tax here from our local government. But you have, you know, and we're a very large district. We've been very fortunate, as with Miami-Dade, as with Broward, but many of our districts have been suffering with funding, you know, for years. And not having the adequate funding to even do just the basics they need, of whether it's to expand for additional schools because they're crowded, or to fix, you know, the necessities for the health of our children within our public school system. And so it has been a very grave concern. I know many of my constituents, not constituents, but many of my colleagues have requested to go back to Tallahassee. Right now, we're not slated to go back into session until next March. So we unfortunately have been sitting idle as leaders through this pandemic for months now. We ended in March of this year, and we don't return back to deal with this particular issue until March. But we've asked for special sessions to kind of deal with this. We've asked for additional dollars. There have been various task force, not only from our local governments requesting funds, but also you have statewide leaders, you have leading organizations that have asked for additional funds, and just the question of whether or not schools will have to put in additional portables for social distancing, the additional adequate, hand washing stations. The science is there. We've done various town halls around the state with local leaders, with our school leaders, as well as, our news journalists have continued to be on top of this. Every other day, it seems as though there's a news station, a local news station, really having or hammering in on this particular issue. And, here in Florida, we're looking at it's not if it'll happen, more so it's when it will happen, because our schools are not necessarily ready or, ready to deal with this pandemic, but also, we are aware that things happen and our students are really at risk. We have currently, I believe, we have over 500,000 folks that have been affected with coronavirus, and we have shown or separated that data to where it's, I believe, 25,000 or over 25,000 of just children alone that have been affected by this disease. We just had earlier this week 2 teenagers to pass here in Florida from corona. So, it's a very scary situation that, our leadership is putting our children at risk. And so there's just a continuous fight around the state from parents and, like I say, from teachers to not have this go on. I know South Florida, which is Broward and Miami-Dade County, many of them have extended past, instead of starting their school in August, but really trying to kind of hold back as long as possible their start date, because as you know, in those areas, it's definitely an epicenter for this disease. So their numbers are gravely ridiculous, including, just their hospital stays. So we're praying.
Yeah. Hey, prayer works. But of course, prayer without deeds. And I'm going to recognize Senator Hillman Frazier from Mississippi just to share. And Senator Frazier, thanks for being on the call. What we're doing is just kind of sharing what's going on in our states. The whole purpose of today's conversation is a listening session so that the next 2 webinars that we do, one on K through 12, one on higher ed, with the help of our CRT and our labor workforce roundtable, we want to be able to come back and be able to respond to questions. We're particularly interested in Mississippi and what y'all have decided to do, given the fact that we've seen on the news where there have been spikes. Your numbers seem to be spiking. And so if you would just share with us what you'd like us to know regarding schools closing, return to school in your area there in Mississippi.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Mississippi had a big challenge attacking this problem. We had to end our session, take a recess in February because of the virus. And as of last week, we had about 50 members affected by the virus. Some were hospitalized. In terms of public education, during the time we came back in March, we decided to allocate money to expand broadband in the state. And we came up with a program that would allow us to put a grant out there and allow the private industry to match the dollar for dollar to expand the broadband in those areas of the state that don't have broadband. We also allocated money to buy those devices for all school students in the state, because we realized that in order to educate them, distance learning is a must. So we want to make sure that all school districts, just influence school districts, have the devices they need to be successful. So the devices, along with the broadband, will help us address the problems we're having right now. But the challenge we have right now is when we open the schools. We had one school up in the north part of the state to open just last week, and they have 115 out because of the virus right now, because they opened too soon.
Wow.
We asked the governor to delay the start of school, the educators, the health folks, but the governor was afraid to do that. He said he's going to implement a statewide mask mandate, and also just let the local school districts decide when they're going to reopen schools. But most of them are going to try to reopen after Labor Day as opposed to opening too soon, because it's going to affect not only the students, but also their families and also the teachers. So we're looking at that. But like that pandemic made us look at our educational system at the shortfalls we're facing right now. So we decided to just address those issues. Some of our school districts do have broadband. They do have the device in all the students' hands, but some of the poor districts, like in the Delta and other part of the state, don't have access to that. So during this session, we did allocate enough money to buy those devices for all the students in the state, all grades, to make sure they have the devices. And also I stated that we also allocated money to expand broadband parts of the state, but they don't have right now, and also giving them a chance to also establish different hotspots in parts of the state. But we are monitoring that. But one problem we had is that we passed the appropriation bill for the teachers this past just last month. All of our teachers' pay bill was in there, but the governor vetoed that bill, and right now the school districts don't know how they're going to receive their money. The governor said he's not going to call us back in the session because of the pandemic. He said too many members are out sick right now. But we're going to come back and override his veto, because once we recessed just last month, we gave us the power to come back to address those COVID-related issues. So we can come back and change the resolution, allow us to override his veto to make sure the teachers are paid throughout the state, and also to address other issues we have throughout the state. But we did not join Senate that just recessed, so we would have the option to come back to deal with that issue and deal with any additional money that will be coming down for the federal government for the COVID-related problems in this state. So that's where we're in our state right now. Going forward, but we still have many challenges, but we are together on the House side and the Senate side in terms of what we're going to do to make sure that we address the needs of the students and the families in this state.
Mm-hmm. And so, Senator, let me ask you on the broadband question. Are y'all using pretty much the CARES money, the money that's coming in from the feds? Are you adding to that from your general fund, or y'all using just federal dollars to expand broadband?
We're using the CARES funds for that, but we're also adding to that. And also we got our rural electric power associations to match it dollar for dollar in terms of expanding it throughout the state. So although that's going to allow us to expand faster because we have additional dollars to go along with it. And they're jumping on board because we want to make sure they be a part of that in terms of expanding broadband in the state. So dollar for dollar on the part of those private investors that we have coming in.
That's right. Let me ask you, if I may. I saw, and this is separate from the school issue, but kind of related, because I saw something about the capacity there in Jackson. The hospital has reached capacity, and they interviewed the medical director of the hospital, and she was talking about her concern about running out of space and all of that. And just from a school connection, I think about some families, a lot of community in Black and brown families, you've got multi-generations, and I'm wondering whether or not the fact that you've got so many people coming down with the virus, how that might bode for our school children who may be in households with grandmama and mama and 3 generations, sometimes 4. Just curious about that, and whether or not the capacity.
Right. We do have capacity right now. The state health officer said just like pouring gasoline on a fire if you allow the students to come back too soon. because they're going to be affected, and they're going to take those same viruses back to their parents and grandparents. But in terms of our hospitals in the state, they are running out of space because some parts of the state don't even have hospitals. We did allocate money for others to reopen that were struggling before the pandemic hit, but we are at a capacity in the state, and the numbers are going up. They're not. We don't have a plateau at this point at all. And like I said, if we open schools too soon, it's going to make the problem worse because more and more will be affected. We pointed out just last week the school district up in Corinth opened, and the first day they had 2 affected students. The next day they had 7 affected students, and they had to isolate 115 different faculty members and students altogether because of that. And they're saying that if we open schools too soon, that's going to be the case. That's going to happen all over the state of Mississippi because the numbers are going up all over the state of Mississippi. And the capacity issue is real because they don't have the beds anymore. They're being forced to put them in other areas and try to take them to other states also. And we're also running short on healthcare professionals because they're tired of working 12 hours a day and coming into the danger zone. So we're trying to make sure that we do things to attract additional healthcare providers, nurses, and doctors because it is a real pandemic that's affecting us.
Okay, I think we may. Well, Senator Frazier, thank you so much for that update. And listen, a real special thank you for taking the time to be on the call. And I hope you will please share with Senator Norwood, Solly Norwood, who I understand has just lost his brother as well. Our condolences on behalf of NBCSL, and just please give him our best and let him know he and his family are in our thoughts and prayers. Wow, this is, and Senator Frazier, just for your information, Senator Ron Rice also lost his wife today. So we want to make sure that we keep Ron and his family in our thoughts and prayers. Wanted to, before we wrap this up, Representative Brown, Camille Brown, wanted just to share with you how good it has been, and this is a ALC 2019 piece of information. The Florida group had the young man who's the Florida Education Association director. I have really enjoyed watching him on the national scene, speaking on behalf of teachers there in Florida and just the education system itself. And remember what a great job he did for us in Fort Lauderdale. So please share with him our appreciation. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but the young man that we gave an award to at our gala also wound up with all kinds of scholarships. So that was really nice to hear. When we started this, we said we wanted to try to keep it to an hour. Are there any other comments, closing thoughts before we close this webinar out? We're just by way of reminding you that if you have some information that you'd like to share with the group, please put it in the chat. We will make sure that it gets shared. NBCSL on its webpage will have a COVID-19 on the COVID-19 tab. We have a resource section, and we have created one on education, and hope you will go and visit that website. And if there's information you'd like to share, if you would just email it to executive-director@nbcsl.org, that would be great. Any final thoughts, any parting comments from any?
I just had one. This is Assemblywoman Jackson from New Jersey.
Yes,
we've talked a lot about the internet. We talked a lot about broadband. One of the other conversations that I wanted to bring up is about broadband, in the sense that we don't have the infrastructure. 2, how do we start to build the infrastructure? And then 3, how do we get states and the federal government to buy into the broadband concept? And it's not just an urban issue, but it's also an issue in rural areas.
Yes.
I've talked to some of our superintendents here, and in our densely populated areas like Trenton, it's been speculated that we can have a broadband system in each one of our schools that may be able to blanket our whole city to be able to give people access to the internet. But I'm still thinking about those that can't afford it. And so that's where I'm thinking the schools might be able to jump in. But also, as we think about it in a broader sense, I think broadband would be a great thing if we start to have the conversations about building the infrastructure. It's not something that happens overnight, but it's definitely something that we need. And then again, we have $10 a month programs, but those are only short terms. It's just, again, a Band-Aid over the real issue about gaining access to the internet. So I don't know. I know you said staff was taking notes on it, but if we can begin to have those conversations, I'm trying to have a hearing on it in our utilities committee to be able to start the conversation. It's definitely that I think we can do. It's a lot of work though, but I definitely want to look into doing that.
Assemblywoman, I appreciate you raising that issue, and you mentioned, of course, in the rural areas, you're absolutely right. My point about urban was simply to remind people, because there's a tendency for folk to think that lack of access to broadband is just a rural problem, and it's not. You mentioned your utilities commission, your public service commissions. That's certainly a place to start. And one of the things that we want to make sure of is that we include some of our CRT members have expertise in broadband, and I know that some of them are on the line, and so we are certainly open to that. I would suggest to you that the answer to your question is simply continuing to do what you're doing, and that is advocacy and all of that. Whether it's advocacy and in our positions as legislators to make sure that whatever state funding is there, going to our public service commissions and anybody else, that it is covering what we need to be covered. The other thing, and Senator Frazier is still on the line, I'm seeing a note here that says Mississippi is a great example to look to for that. We talk about public service commissions and our utility commissions, but the other piece of it is, and I'm going to yield to Lamar Davis, who works with us as our communications person, to respond to your comments about broadband. Lamar, if you would.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me, Madam President?
Sure.
I've had the pleasure to work as a utility commission for Arkansas and in partnership with Brandon Presley on the communications committee for the National Caucus of Utility Regulators. Brandon in Mississippi represents mostly a rural area, and he has been engaged with the telecommunication companies. It is a fight. It's similar like putting electricity in rural parts, but it is a fight worth having. He is leading the South and leading the Southeast in that, and he's a friend, and I'd love to engage him. I think he would be willing to come and talk to us, or at least field questions about what it takes from the General Assembly as well as the utility regulators to get the ball rolling. So with your permission, madam, I would engage him, and I'd love to have him come and talk to our body.
That sounds great. Would love for you to be able to do that. I want to make sure, and just want to follow up again, Assemblywoman, on your point about the broadband. That's where, y'all, we've got to make sure that we are asking the right questions when these people come before us, particularly those of you who may be on your labor, commerce, and industry, your ways and means appropriations, or whatever it is, whatever. I'm sorry, y'all, I was trying to multitask and I wound up not, for some reason, my video is gone out. But this whole broadband piece, and I think we really need to make sure that we are adequately covering this. So I'm going to ask our staff if they would look at making sure that we weave that in. But here's the other piece about the broadband. I think when you talk about whether it's the federal level, because we're hearing a lot now about broadband, Congressman Clyburn from here in South Carolina has pretty much has done a lot of work in that area and has pretty much made broadband and access to broadband a priority for him. And that's not just in South Carolina, but across the country. And so my point is, I think there is a lot of attention. This COVID-19 has really pulled the scab off a lot of things, and it has shown some inequities that we may or may not have recognized was there. And access to broadband is one. And when we think about broadband and we think about the spine, the whole capacity, the build out and all of that, it is not just about education, but in a lot of our states, we are moving toward telehealth, telemedicine, and all of that. So it's critical that broadband, access to broadband, quite frankly, ought to be considered a right. But you're right, you're absolutely on point, Assemblywoman Jackson, and we've got a telecommunications committee that is chaired by Representative Ohabasan out of Kansas, as well as Senator Audrey Gibson out of Florida. And they have been working on that issue, and we certainly want to make sure that we keep all members apprised of what we're doing. So I'm a firm believer that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so on broadband, we've just got to keep squeaking and recognize that it is something, it's a necessity. It's kind of like, you know, water and lights and all that kind of stuff. It is indeed a utility that we. Any additional comments from anyone?
Yes, Madam Chair. I want us also to look at a couple of other situations in addition to the broadband, not difficulty. If I drive my car through Easy Pass at 60 miles, 70 miles an hour, I'm going to get billed. You should, because they got the technology that's going to grab that. If I am put on house arrest and I got a band around my ankle and I go outside of that limit, I'm going to be tagged. And so if we begin to look at technology, when we talk about broadband, we talk about corporate America, you know, the Verizons of the world. We got to begin to say, hold on, the technology exists, that everyone in their households ought to be able to have this because the technology exists. Again, if I go through Easy Pass, I can be going 80 miles an hour flying. I'm going to get billed plus get a ticket because they captured that in my house. And so I think, Assemblywoman Jackson, I would love to work with you on that. I think we have to begin to look at some of the options and sort of catch up on sort of the language and technology so that we're just not into, you know, one area as it relates to this.
I would agree. And Senator Jackson, I'm going to ask our staff to reach out to Assemblywoman Jackson, to reach out to Senator Gibson. If you have any interest in being a part of the Telecommunications Committee, I'm sure they would welcome your involvement in that committee.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I've thought about the even telehealth, you know, how we're doing now. You know, who has access, who doesn't have access, but you bring up some very, very important points. And you know, it's about, again, who has the first right opportunities to have access to this technology. So I look forward to with you offline too.
Okay, sounds good. Any other comments from anyone still on the line?
Yeah, Madam President, they also have, this Representative Newton.
Yes, sir.
They also had down here doing when they sent the kids home, they provide them with, they got little mobile hotspots that they provided, give them broadband inside the home. And in junction with the buses, like I told you, the buses wasn't moving either. So they were putting big broadband things on the buses, taking into areas that didn't have the infrastructure. So we have to look at that too. We have to wait till they run wires and dig holes. I mean, it's a lot of mobile stuff that's out there. Another thing I wanted to bring up your attention, I don't know if it's been mentioned or we had a great time in Lauderdale. It was very informative. But our next year conference that's going to be in Texas, is that
No,
happening? Or is that a problem with the COVID, or anybody
no,
on that
sir.
road? Or
Rep, it's a virtual conference. It's
okay,
going to
okay,
be everywhere. Go
okay,
on our
okay. I didn't know.
website.
All right.
Yeah. No,
I
go
didn't get
on our
that.
website and check it out.
Okay.
You know, the staff has put a lot of work into it. And quite frankly, the whole point was, you know, with the lack of leadership on this stuff coming from the top, we don't need to think by December it's going to be safe. And so what the officers, what we agreed to do was to have a virtual conference. And so it'll be all virtual. We are working really hard to make it interesting and exciting, and hopefully we will get members to sign up. There's going to be some important business that will take place there. It'll be election of officers. So I hope those of you on the line will give serious thought to offering for leadership positions within this organization. But keep checking our website because we will have information there. We are putting the final touches on the conference schedule and want to get that posted and on the website.
I was last evening. I was on a candidate hobnob they had, one of the Tampa Chamber had, and they got this thing called Lunchroom. It's called Lunch Pool. It's the app that they were using. It's similar to Zoom, but it was really cool because they had floors. You can say I'm on 3rd floor, table 12. You know what I'm saying? Similar to how we have our conferences is in different rooms. You know what I'm saying? But when you go into that room, you got a speaker. You can have you'll be right in there with them. You can ask questions and see them. So that, I don't know if you got that technology if they're looking at that, but it's something called Lunch Pool, LUNCHPOLL. But it was very impressive because I was on the first table too. There, people, it went outside 9 floors, but similar to like a layout of a conference center, if you will, Madam President.
Wow.
And people in those
Rep Newton, thanks for that. I know our IT guru, Mr. Wayne Roach, probably knows all about it. So, and if he doesn't, he's probably busily trying to figure out what it is. But thanks for pointing that out. We got hand raised by Representative Brown, Representative Alexander, and then Mr. Lamar Davis. In that order, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to throw it out there. I'm not sure if we've already involved them, but I know here in Florida, we've involved Paula Hoisington and her company, Net Communications. They're all over this net neutrality stuff. And maybe in the next call or conversation, they can provide some information that's needed and sort of what's out there as far as resources. And then also Marva Johnson, who sits
charter
on our corporate roundtable. I know she has done some amazing things here in Florida. She also sits on our State Board of Education. So as it relates to what's going on in Florida, she's very aware of that, but also the resources with internet access for our students that were home. She played a part in that. So maybe, we can have them a part of these conversations as well.
Sure. And just FYI, Paula is on the line. She's a part of she's listening. She's in listening mode, and I'm sure her heart is just warm all over that we are talking her language about broadband and telecommunications and all of that. And so we certainly are going to be looking to Paula as well as Marva on those things. But thanks for pointing that out. Could be appreciated. Rep. Alexander.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I accidentally hit my hand to be raised, but since I had to,
well, you don't have to feel compelled to say anything.
No, but let me say this about let me say this about the congressman. He have employed a young lady from Florence, and only thing she does is the broadband. That's her primary job. He brought up there just for that purpose. And I'm going to touch base with her and see what they're doing, see what they're planning, and maybe she'll be able to share some information with me that I can share with the body here the next time around.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Rep. Alexander. Lamar?
Yes, ma'am. I'll be quick. I apologize for joining a little bit late.
That's okay.
I'm gonna I'm going to put Paula on the spot since she's my dear friend and she knows Brandon well. And I know they have a great working relationship. And I suggest that the two of them come back to us and talk about how to do it at the state and federal level. And I think that would be educational for the members. I'd just like to say that if you think about education, you think about economic development, you think about healthcare, if you don't have broadband, it segregates. You have a separate society. Those who don't have broadband are separate, they're secondary, they're lower class citizens when it comes to moving forward in these key 3 areas. And so I cannot overemphasize the importance of this. And I think Brandon is already there, and I think Paula knows that as well. So I'd love to work with that, and thanks for bringing it up again.
Sure, and I'm not, you know, we aren't going to put Paula on the spot unless she wants to speak. But I certainly know offline we'll have that conversation, and staff will continue those conversations. And I don't see an indication yet that Paula wants to say anything. So let's consider that she has. Oh, huh? Was that somebody? Paula, was that Paula trying to say something?
No, she's okay.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to tee her up now. I was thinking about later.
No. I just thought, no, not necessarily in response to you, but just across the board to the conversation that we've had. Just know that our staff will follow up with our, and that was the point I was making about our 2 roundtables are going to be active participants in the next ones we do. And so it kind of sounds like we will make sure that we weave into the conversation about K-12 and higher ed, the broadband piece of it. And just to build on Rep. Newton's point about mobile hotspots and use of school buses and all of that, we've done the same thing here in South Carolina. There are a number of rural communities that don't have access to broadband. And what we wound up doing to complete the school year as well as this summer was to use school buses that were equipped with Wi-Fi equipped, and just use those buses and park them in central areas in neighborhoods, and so that the students would have access to broadband. The other thing that we are doing is the whole notion of mobile hotspots. The state has allowed, we've got about right now, we had a meeting the other day, and what we're doing for areas that don't have the infrastructure, that don't have the fiber or whatever, we are issuing mobile hotspots to school districts so that they can be utilized. And what I am trying to get them to do is make sure that while we have all this money and we're doing all of this, that we look at capacity and look at doing what we need to do for building the capacity to accommodate those other platforms like telehealth, telemedicine, and all of that. Final comments, questions?
One more.
Sure, Rep. Newton.
Yes, what I want to share with you, as we look at this also, bear in mind that it used to be, I don't know, it's how it is in Florida, it used to be that the local government would dictate where they put the broadband and the fiber at. And a lot of times, if an area did not have sufficient income levels, they wouldn't run it there. But locally, we would make them do that. But what happened was they went to Tallahassee, and now they can put it where the money is. I live out here in a nice area, but we never had fiber, never. And I'm a state representative, so I know that the layperson, we got to make sure that as we look at it, look at the areas and make sure they're not omitting anybody or doing any redlining because of potential, not having the kind of income that they look for their business model. Because it's all about access. Well, we've been talking about broadband since I've been on the National League of Cities on City Council. So this is not, as Black folk, we gotta kind of get off the stick here a little bit, make them do something. We still talking about
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yep. You're absolutely right, Rep. And the whole bottom line is advocacy.
Yes.
We have got to use our voices to try to make the case. After all, isn't that what we're there for?
Yes, ma'am. You know what?
I recognize that it's profit driven, and I'm not trying to cut people out of a profit, but access to broadband, quite frankly, is a necessity in this day and age. It truly is, for a variety of reasons that we've talked about.
From our conference, what I took from it that stuck with me the most, that whole 3 or 4 days we were there, was when Mr. Freddie Gray came in and spoke at the banquet. He said that was so powerful, it stuck with me to this day and will forever. And he said that, you know, he said, I wouldn't have missed this invite for the world. And he's standing there saying that, I look out over this room, and it's the dream that King had.
Yes.
And that 4,500 Black state representatives, senators, and assembly people from all over the country. He said, we will not be free until we eradicate all of these unjust policies and tactics that they use against Black people off the books. And this thing about broadband, I don't mean to belabor the moment, but they've been talking about this forever. You know what I'm saying? And COVID made it plaster apparent. So I think that now is the time for us to just, you know, everybody else got water hoses turned on them and got hung and burnt and killed. So I think now is the time for us to put our neck out on the limb. And as these corporations come to us and they want stuff, we got to demand that they do include these areas, because one gentleman was right. There's two different societies. One got technology and one don't. So that's my
Well, I appreciate all of the comments and the conversation. We please, before you leave the chat room, there are some material, some items that have been put in the chat, some resource materials, some data, some information. I really appreciate y'all's time. We will be back in touch about the next one. Feel free to share information about these webinars with your colleagues who may be interested in joining. This is all about y'all. All of the materials are going to be posted on our website, www.nbcsl.org. And remember, if there are things that come to you once we have closed this out, simply email them to director@nbcsl.org, director@nbcsl.org, and we will share them. And I hope all of y'all stay safe. Thank you so much for taking time to be a part of this conversation today. It has been very helpful, and hopefully you feel the same way. Stay safe and be well, guys. Take care.